Since 1992, Homeboy Industries, founded by Father Gregory Boyle, has employed, supported, and mentored thousands of gang members and people formerly incarcerated in South Central LA. The homeboys and homegirls, or simply homies, as Father Greg affectionately calls them, have had their lives torn apart by racism, drugs, violence, with family lives disrupted or worse, riddled with abuse. Homeboy offers them this place of hope, right in the middle of it all. Father Greg, otherwise known as Father G or G, is a Jesuit priest and a fierce proponent of a liberation theology of extravagant tenderness. And he's in good company with Pope Francis, Mother Teresa, and others. Father Greg's life is his message, recognizing the humanness in even the most hardcore gang members, seeing it before they can see it themselves, and offering them hope. We can love people into wanting better lives, he says with confidence, love them into healing, into community, into loving themselves. Loving oneself is the change agent. Now, I've been a huge fan of Father Greg's books for years. Tattoos on the Heart, Barking at the Choir, and then his latest, The Whole Language. His message of the healing power of love is consistent, heartening, hopeful, and he is also a terrific storyteller. Father Greg travels on speaking tours all over the world, bringing a homie or two with him, and his books are filled with their words and their awakenings. Here's one story I really like. I have a framed photograph in my office of Victor, a young homie, Father Greg says. He's receiving a bouquet of flowers from the Queen of Sweden, in Sweden. Long story, he says. Smart kid. I had met him at a probation camp, and he later told me that he taught himself French in the camp. Why'd you learn that? I asked. I was bored, he said. Victor flew home from Sweden and came straight into the office, jet-lagged and giddy. He stopped me 3 times that day to hug me and say, that was life-changing. I'm even going to remove my tattoos. Later, he would tell me, I'm going to try and dress differently now, less gangster. In fact, I want to dress more like you. You mean old-fashioned and out of it? Exactly, he says. Some months later, having decompressed from the experience, Victor tells me, damn, G, I'm in love and it feels proper. Who you in love with? I ask him. Myself, he says. Victor had been invited into his own gracious heart and RSVP'd, says Father Greg. Transformation is not just a destination, but a process. He saw his own goodness and then could repurpose himself for positivity. He saw his own goodness and then could repurpose himself for positivity. That's the core of Father G's message. When we can see our own goodness, we can transform and repurpose ourselves. Being loved by others can awaken us to our own true nature. I've long believed that each one of us is born with an essential goodness, what has been called our secret beauty. Meditation teacher Tara Brach says, the quest of the mystic is to be on the lookout for the hidden wholeness, the secret beauty in everything. Then we can remind each other that we are made for loving, and that the true measure of our love is to love without measure. Now, I hope you enjoyed our earlier meditation about recognizing the goodness and worth in ourselves and pouring love into our own hearts. The truth is, we deserve nothing less than to be bathed in that recognition all the time. We are fully worth that if only we could believe it. Our meditation practice brought to mind a story from another teacher, Jack Cornfield, about the Babemba tribe of South Africa and how they react when a person has broken the tribe's code or acts irresponsibly or unjustly. The person is placed in the center of the village, alone, unfettered. All work ceases, and every man, woman, and child in the village gathers in a large circle around the accused individual. Then each person in the tribe speaks to the accused one at a time, each recalling the good things that the person in the center of the circle has done in their lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail or accuracy is recounted. All their positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and kindnesses are recited carefully and at length. The tribal ceremony often lasts for several days. At the end, the tribal circle is broken, a joyous celebration takes place, and the person is symbolically and literally welcomed back into the tribe. That is restorative justice. Both the restorative practice of the Babemba tribe and the work of places like Homeboy Industries brings people back to wholeness, to health, to the fullness of their own truth. None of us are whole until all of us are whole. If only we could recognize our own goodness reflected in the eyes of those around us, what a different world this would be. Our essential goodness is that secret beauty within each of us, and when others hold up a mirror and reflect that beauty, everything begins to change. It actually doesn't require a lengthy ritual or an entire organization for this to happen. Here's another story. I do love stories. The first McDonald's in Moscow opened in 1990. Many months of training preceded the grand opening. The workers were taught to welcome the customers. The idea of welcome was a very foreign concept to both the workers and to the customers walking in. The staff were trained to convey welcome, and the Russian for that is translated, "Your arrival here is pleasing to us." Very formal. There were historic lines of Russians standing in the cold to get in. And it wasn't for the fries or the Happy Meals. The lines were long because the customers would not leave the place once they were in. They said the reason was the welcome. Your arrival here is pleasing to us. In those few words, the patrons' secret beauty, their worth, was reflected back to them. And it can be that simple. The hard part, says Father Greg, is to believe in our own goodness, our own nobility. And yet we don't become noble, we locate our nobility, he says. The hard part is embracing our inner nobility, peace, beauty, and goodness. Unfortunately, too often for all of us, it's the frightened, damaged self that takes center stage, which reminds me of our story, right? That little dog, that little frightened, damaged self. But we can learn to catch ourselves. The homies think that this is their truth, he goes on. They get caught in this downward spiral and repetitive cycle of unworthiness and shame. The flip side of this is developing a different way to define yourself in donation rather than deficit. It's not that they've forgotten their original goodness, but that they've never been properly introduced to it. It's not that they've forgotten their original goodness, but they've never been properly introduced to it. Isn't that true of most of us to some degree? Isn't that why a meditation exercise like the one we did earlier, where we hold up a mirror to our own beauty and worthiness, might bring some of us to tears? Or for some of us, might feel like an impossibility. We have just never been properly introduced to our own goodness. How easy it is for us to believe and invest in our own not good enough identity, to believe that the damaged self is who we are. And then we never want to be who we are. There's one more story that Father Greg tells, and this one might be my favorite. Sam, a Homeboy alum, had arranged for composer and pianist Eric Genius, who has performed at Carnegie Hall, to give a concert at Pelican Bay Prison, a supermax facility on the California coast. Eric plays the piano and has a couple of friends who accompany him on strings. Sam had secured permission for 200 inmates, but only 60 showed up, and Sam was a bit disappointed. Eric had planned to play for 45 minutes and then engage in a question and answer for 15 minutes. He began to play, and something descended on these folks gathered in the gym. There was a reverent silence in the air. Stillness. Inmates and guards alike were held in the music's spell. It was the most glorious thing Sam had ever witnessed in that place. He looked at the prisoners, and soon they were all sobbing. He saw that the guards were discreetly flicking away tears. The magnificent music had detonated some release, so welcome and unexpected. Eric finished and turned to his stunned audience and asked if there were any questions. There was only silence for some time. Then one inmate rose. He had something to say, but he was still crying so hard it was momentarily a struggle for him to locate his question. He could only utter one word. Why? Eric began to cry as well and said, "Because you are deserving. You are worthy of beauty and music, and because there is no difference between you and me. There is no difference between you and me." When we are anchored in love, says Father Greg, we're ever mindful of our undeniable goodness, and that is why. Poet Derek Walcott tells us, "The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, 'Stay, sit here, eat.'" Friends, may you soon greet yourself arriving at your own door with a smile of welcome. May we all, every day, in every moment or in scattered moments, here and there, be reminded of our own goodness, our own secret beauty. And from that place of remembering our worth, may we shower ourselves and each other with extravagant tenderness as we learn to speak the whole language of humanity, the whole language of love. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Amen.